How do we measure progress when we don't use grades?
Yeah. So there are three things we care about with the Eagles progressing. Of course, overarching all this is their hero's journey, but three things we measure. The first is we use points to measure effort. The second is we use badges to measure excellent work. And the third is we use peer reviews to measure growth in warm-heartedness, tough-mindedness, in other words, in citizenship. We use points. 20 points, at least in our studios, equals 1 hour of hard work. I mean, you're dialed in for an hour to earn 20 points. And so by tying the activities on tracker or in your studio, the challenges to points, you can see how long is an Eagle dialed in or how often are they dialed in flow, really doing work in a week. Now, in elementary, that might be only, 200 points? Mm-hmm. Might be only 10 hours a week. And you think, well, gosh, that's not many hours. And then you think about, for adults, how often we're really dialed in for that long. By the time they're in Launchpad, it might be 600, 800, 900, 1,000 points. The Launchpadders might be dialed in for 40 or 50 hours a week. So points are effort, badges are excellent work. So a badge is a compilation of a project. It might be a quest, it might be a genre, it might be finishing calculus, but it's some set of activities and challenges packaged up so you can prove to others what you can do. Badges are excellent if they're approved by the Eagles. Excellence is measured in terms of if this is the first time you did it, was it your best effort? If it's something you've done before, did you improve? And if it's been approved for an exhibition or by a contest, then it's automatically approved, or if it's compared to a master. If you wrote a short story, is it as good as Hemingway? So badges have to be excellent work. And then the final thing, peer review. Eagles ask each other, are you upholding the standards of the studio? And in a moderated way, provide growth mindset feedback.
I've been told that Acton measures more than any learning community on the face of the earth. The parents get a lot of data if they want it. Every online learning program has lots of information, lots of ways to measure progress, whether it's time spent on a skill in Khan Academy or, levels of words, in no red ink. There's so many things to measure, but the stories we hear the most are not about points or badges. The stories we hear about learning over time really are about the things that are learning to be, which is how a child communicates so much better with their family, how a child has become independent in how they get ready in the morning to go to school, basic things like that. But that's what ends up being the stories around the progress of human growth more than just measuring points. Or you realize how dissatisfying it is to get a letter grade over a period of time that a child has spent learning something. There are many things to measure, and I'm excited that we have lots of different ways to look at measuring progress.
Well, you can't measure the most important things that happen. I mean, it feels reassuring as an Acton owner or an Acton parent to have the Iowa test or the Stanford 10 test and to find Eagles are moving at 2 or 3 grade levels. But if you're not careful, you're going to focus on that, and you're focusing on the wrong thing. It's like focusing on grades. However, I do think as a guide, it's helpful to be able to have something like points and an extrinsic set of rewards to get energy up on a Monday.
Right.
It's helpful too because it allows the Eagles to find their different pecking orders. You might be good at math, I might be good at English. We each find our own place, and it's great in a multi-age environment. You can't really track who's good at what. It's too complicated with multiple areas. I might run faster, you might cook better. So we actually have this way of each person can be measured rising up. But at the end of the day, that's really all about motivation. It's all about getting people to be kinder to each other with peer reviews, to actually focus on getting real work done with points, and to do excellent work with badges. Those are all just small amounts of motivation for the things that really matter.
Well, and I think it's also really interesting that at Acton, the progress is really transparent.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone understands how everyone else is doing, and there's not much secrecy around it. In fact, that transparency turns out to be an important part of the learning journey. And so everyone gets to see how people are progressing and how many points they have. And I think that's part of the motivation as well. But I think it's also a part of the peer-to-peer teaching and holding each other accountable. You can't really fudge on how you're doing at an Acton Academy. It's just out there.
Well, and this is where the badge audits are important. So you ask, how do you make sure people are doing excellent work when it is absolutely against the Acton principles for an adult to grade anything at any time for any reason? We don't do that. In fact, we haven't graded anything at Acton in 10 years. However, badges do have to be excellent, have to be approved by peers. We went over how excellence is measured, and here's where the secret sauce comes in. Every session you have an audit. How do you decide who gets audited? Well, first you do a survey, a confidential survey, and you ask the heroes. You ask the Eagles who needs to be audited, and they know. They know who's been mailing it in. You take that list of names, and then you go randomly select people from the remaining Eagles, so you don't know if you were on the list or not. That's the group that gets audited. You ask for an audit committee of volunteers. Who volunteers for audit committee? The toughest people. Then, if Laura's turned in a badge and I've approved it, and the audit committee kicks out her badge because we're good friends and I didn't want to hold you accountable, not only does Laura lose a six-week badge, but because I approved it, I lose a 6-week badge. And now both of our badges are subject to a deeper audit. We've had Eagles lose as much as 6 months worth of badges because they were actually dishonestly approving things that weren't excellent. So this system of transparency, knowing what everyone does, and peer review actually leads to a far, far higher standard and faster growth, more excellence than if adults were setting some sort of minimum standard for everyone to cross.
And I would love to add at this point, this is one of those levels of complexity of the Acton model that I did not implement in our elementary studio until about 5 or 6 years into it. I would not worry about the auditing, all of that, until you have a tribe that is solidly grounded in the identity of being heroes, working hard and being kind to each other. And then you can layer on these processes like the badge auditing.
Absolutely. In the early days, it's about growth mindset praise, Eagles comparing to each other in real time. If you only have 7 Eagles in the studio, you can do this actually one-on-one in person. And so I agree with that. Keep it simple at first, but over time, you're going to measure effort, excellence, and how people get along. You don't need all these systems at the start.
Right, and reporting progress to parents, I think, is an interesting point to bring up. In our elementary studio, we have journey meetings. We invite parents 3 times a year to come with their Eagle and share the portfolio of work that the Eagle has accomplished. We have a checklist of questions the parents think about before the meeting, and the meeting always is with the Eagle. And the guide's role in these meetings is never to tell a parent how an Eagle is doing, but simply to ask questions to put the Eagle and the parents together to have the conversation. So the idea is the Eagle gets to answer questions that the parents may have, and it's so amazing when you see parents learn from their Eagle how they're doing. Most of the time, the parents have no idea how hard the child is working and what they're struggling with and what their areas of success are. So to get them together and really set up the conversation is really what those meetings are about. And sharing the data, but also sharing really where the Eagle is struggling and where they need encouragement and support at home is probably the most powerful thing that comes out of those meetings.
So how do you measure progress when there aren't any grades? How do you measure excellence when there aren't any grades? You have to be very careful how you define progress and excellence. And in many ways, we're trying to give parents the peace of mind, Eagles a competitive spirit, and then space and enthusiasm and encouragement to let the real learning happen. And that's something you really don't see day to day. You see it month to month and year after year, and it's an amazing amount of growth. But all of these systems are really pointed towards allowing the space for that beauty to happen on the hero's journey.